So this is pretty cool. Here's a Strandberg Boden Bass Standard 5 in the charcoal finish. I played a few sound samples there, but for the most part, there's nothing too surprising. It's got the standard Fishman Fluence pickups and preamp pairing. I've never been a huge fan of Fishman Fluence, as they're a little more naturally scooped to me, being someone who prefers kind of the clarity of J pickups and a mid-range growl. They're definitely not bad though, and I think they work a lot better in this instrument than they did on the Spectre Dimension. I personally prefer the single coil sound over the humbucker, but that's just me. I'll give you another little sample here of humbucker versus single coil mode. Let's be honest though, just taking a look at this thing, the ergonomics and playability is probably what brought you here, and less so the tone of it. There's a lot to unpack, but first and foremost is the weight. At 6.5 pounds, this is undoubtedly the lightest bass I've ever played and maybe ever seen. Frankly, that was the reason I actually got it. I usually play sitting down, so not having a 9 to 10 pound block of wood cutting off circulation in my right leg is a breath of fresh air, to say the least. It's a solid block of basswood with this killer flame maple top, and the charcoal finish was a no-brainer for me. Next up is the body shape. You might not think of it right off the bat, but it kind of reminds me of a Warwick thumb when it's sitting on you, with how compact it is. But without all the bulk on the lower end. A lot of players seem to put these things in like different playing positions, like this or something, or this or something, but I just put it in the normal one. I haven't figured out how to comfortably play like this yet, or something like that, with the other curves on the body. The one downside to the body, though, is the right angles along the upper side here. There's a contour at the lower end, which makes sense for guitar, but for bass, I found my forearm is usually resting further up towards the neck, so it's occasionally resting right on that hard angle of the body. It's not a deal breaker, but if you're in the same position for a long time, just resting your wrist, you'll feel it. Let's talk about the headstock, or lack thereof. I didn't anticipate this before, but everything feels kind of lighter, if you will, when you move the neck around. Obviously, that just has to do with physics of weight distributed at the end of a fulcrum, but you can definitely notice it. I'm not sure if that's good or bad, but it definitely reduces overall weight and neck dive, so I'm all for it. The tuners are at the bottom of the bass, where I've seen a lot of the complaints about this instrument. I agree, they're not the smoothest thing in the world. They take a bit of finger grip to turn, but fortunately, Strandberg includes this little socket wrench to do the job for you. So, yeah, it's good for me. Stability has been fine. The occasional inconveniences of the tuners, I think, is worth the reduced weight and being headless. Adjusting the action and intonation is a little tricky. There are a couple demo videos on YouTube from Ola Strandberg, and they're helpful, but I've noticed that you have to really use the tips of your fingers to pinch these tiny little saddles and screw them up or down to adjust the action. You kind of got to use your nails or the very tips of your fingers, which is less than ideal. I kind of wish Strandberg would make these dual use, similar to the tuners, where you can either do it by hand or have some kind of tool. If they added a hexagonal edge around these, they could just include another mini socket wrench, and you could have the option of using a tool instead of using your fingertips. And also, these bridges are pretty long, so you need to use extended length strings for these. I'm using D'Addario NYXL super longs with a tapered bridge, and the taper doesn't go all the way over the saddle, but enough to help the strings sit a little lower. Regarding the neck, it is multi-scale, and it's got Strandberg's trapezoidal EndurNeck profile and this killer roasted maple. And I got lucky enough to land with this nice slab of bird's eye, which was the absolute cherry on the top when I opened it up. Strandberg really knocked it out of the park with this neck. I used to have an 8-string Strandberg guitar, and while the EndurNeck was never a problem, I found myself kind of breathing a sigh of relief when I switched back to a regular neck. On bass, however, it just works for me. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I'm not doing chords or something like that, but on bass, the thick part of the trapezoid always seems to line up right where I need my thumb, right where it needs to be for my thumb. And I'm not really searching around to find the right point to counter the pressure from my fingers. It just kind of happens. And it also has the added benefit of reducing weight and bulkiness in the neck by removing excess material where you're not going to ever place your thumb. And that comes in handy when you stop and notice how wide the neck is at the upper frets. 79 millimeters up here versus 69 on my Spectre Euro Roasted, but it's the same 45 millimeters at the 0 fret, so the same as my Spectre Euro. And you really only feel that width when you get high up on the fretboard, but that's where the EndurNeck comes in handy. It's like paper thin on the upper frets here for the low strings, so despite its width, the neck never feels chunky up here. It's somehow slim feeling, but spacious at the same time. I was initially skeptical about the 33 to 35 inch scale length. Being a Dingwall and a Spectre owner, it seemed like using fan frets for anything less than 34, 35 inches just seemed like an unnecessary complication. However, I was pleasantly surprised. With the exception of maybe a bit on the first fret, I often forget that it's fanned while I'm playing. You really do notice the equalized tension across the strings. Just like a Dingwall, but maybe the strings feel a little looser and slinkier, given the same tuning. I also like the 0 fret more than I anticipated. I thought it was, again, kind of just a needless innovation at first, but now that I've tried it, it helps out in a couple ways. First, the open note sounds tonally similar to the fretted notes. Secondly, when you're on the first fret, it gives a little distance between the corner of the nut and your finger. So you don't have the edge of the nut jutting into your index finger like most fan frets, instrument nuts do. So yeah, I guess if I had to pick a downside, it would be the fact that the upper horn mount is rear mounted. I know I can't speak for everyone, but when I took it out of the box, I immediately removed that. It was stabbing me in the chest. And I've since replaced it with a Dunlop flush mount strap lock. That was by superstar luthier TJ Thompson in Maynard, Massachusetts. And he did a great job on that for me. Not to mention the finger ramp he made as well. Anyways, when I'm sitting down, even with the flush mounts, when it's strapped up, and if you like to play your bass high, you're probably going to get stabbed in the chest, or at least feel the pressure from the strap pin. I know it would take away from the aesthetic of the instrument a bit, but I do kind of wish Strandberg would round out the top a little bit and add an option for a conventional strap pin, or make it enough so that if you want to add one, you can. It's a little too pointy here to install a screw safely, in my opinion. But with that aside, this is a super cool instrument that I'm really excited to get a hold of. I'm excited about Strandberg doing something new in the bass world, particularly by putting the emphasis on lightweight and ergonomic basses. As I've mentioned before, comfort always comes first for me when playing. It doesn't matter how good the tone is if I don't enjoy the feeling of the instrument in my hands and on my leg and my shoulder for hours on end. I know Strandberg really listens to their players and feedback, so I hope some of my comments can maybe get their way and help them improve the Boden bass design even further in future iterations. So thank you guys for watching. And I know this is kind of a quirky bass, so if you have any questions about the Boden bass and its nuances, or what accessories work with it, such as the Strandberg stand, let me know in the comments. Thanks.